Can Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum all average 20 points or more per game this coming season for the New Orleans Pelicans? Let's break it down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Friday. We'll probably have a weekend show as I'm still kind of making my way back from COVID-19. And thank you all to everyone who put in the well wishes in the comments yesterday. I appreciate it. It's kind of rough on today's show. I'm feeling better today, so hopefully I'm not going to be coughing as much. Hopefully you won't hear me wheezing on the show as well. And I want to look at the three main guys on the team, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, and Zion Williamson, and if they can average over 20 points per game next season. Can they all coexist in a sense? So we'll get into that in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, and thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about the team, covering the three main players. We'll cover the role players. We're going to get into head coach Willie Green as we gear up for secret training camp, then real training camp, then preseason, then the start of the regular season. We're less than 2 months away from real Pelicans basketball. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's dive into it, right? So can all three of these guys average 20 points or more? You know, look, the short answer to this is, yeah, they definitely can, because they're all really good players. And this question is really if CJ McCollum can, right? We'll get into Zion and BI in the next two segments, but we know they're going to average over 20 points per game. This really comes down to CJ McCollum. And last year for the Pelicans, he was good. He's a good basketball player despite being, on the wrong side of 30. He'll be 31 during this season. He's still a really good basketball player. 26 games for the Pelicans last year, 24.3 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.3 steals, which is kind of impressive too. He shot 39.4% from three, basically 49% from the field as well. Got to the line 4 times per game. Didn't shoot well there. That was the one kind of weird thing for him. He was kind of low in that regard, just making 2/3 of his free throws, 66% there. But he's a good player, right? Those are incredible numbers. Those are basically career highs across the board for him, other than like the 3-point shooting percentage, which is off of his career high by like a few ticks. Basically a career year for him in New Orleans. This is a guy who for his career has averaged over 19 points per game. And if you ignore the first 2 seasons, well, he averages 21.9, so 22 points per game. So even if he regresses from the 24.3 points per game he scored last season, he's going to regress down to like 19 points at the minimum, right? He's really close to that 20 mark. And so he can absolutely do this, right? The opportunities for open threes are going to be endless for him. 7 attempts per game last season. You have to figure that number will go up. He's going to be able to take as many open three-pointers as he wants with the ball in his hands, or as a catch and shoot guy. He made 2.7 threes per game last year. That's going to be above 3 this coming season, right? Like if you're trying to tally how do you get to 20 points, well, that is 9 to 12 of them right there. You're doing a lot of the easy work is there for him. The other thing, and this is going to come important into play and be important when we talk about Zion Williamson in the next segment, he is, or at least last season, he was one of the better finishers on the team, particularly at the rim. When you factor in drives and aggression, shooting percentage at the rim, being able to draw and ones or getting fouled, he ranks per Basketball Dash Reference as the best driver for this Pelicans team, the best finisher on this roster over Brandon Ingram, over a guy like Jackson Hayes, right, who only takes shots at the rim. But when you factor in aggression, the drives, all of those things, he grades out really high in that category. It's going to mean he's going to get opportunities. Keep that in mind, right? He gets downhill for this team. He wants to go and get buckets and all of those type of things. And he can do that. I'm pulling up the drives numbers right now because I don't remember what he did per game, but let me pull it up here as I spin the wheels, NOP, as I type it in, and I'll get the numbers here for him with New Orleans to see what he did. Okay, apparently he doesn't want to give us those numbers for whatever reason. Because I'm on the team side of thing. I want players, right? Okay, players tracking. It's going to be high, right? It's going to be higher than the 5 that say Lonzo Ball only averaged per game, or less than that, whatever it was, right? This is a guy who doesn't mind getting downhill and putting pressure on the defense. Okay, that number, and of course it's taking forever to load. Drives per game. Oh, no, that's catch and shoot. I should probably edit this out. We're not going to do that. Okay, I finally have it. You can see my brain is still not all back from all of this here. It's making this segment go a little long. Okay, drives per game. CJ McCollum, 11.2. Brandon Ingram was 11.9 in the regular season. Those are really, really, really good numbers. And so it shows that he can do more than just be a catch and shoot guy, that he can get out and he can get downhill and play that way. And when you factor in things like, look, a lot of people ask me, who's the sixth man? You know, I don't think of this team with that. It might be Trey Murphy. It might be someone else, right? But if you think about it, they have the big 3 here. One of, if not 2 of those guys are always going to be on the court at the same time. You can take Zion out and let CJ and Brandon Ingram cook. There's a lineup last year. Trey Murphy makes everything work. Where if you take Valanciunas, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, and then Trey Murphy, and this was in the postseason and the regular season, it's basically, in terms of minutes played, the most efficient lineup the Pelicans had in terms of net rating. So offensive rating minus defensive rating. It was sky high, close to plus 30. In the postseason, it was plus 25. In the regular season, it was plus 17. That's an excellent lineup you can still run, right? And when you think about that lineup, it's going to be CJ and Brandon Ingram getting the majority of the shots. So yeah, I do think there are enough shots to go around with these guys. But Zion Williamson coming back, you know, you would think might hurt CJ, right? Oh, there's only one ball there. Maybe, you know, there are enough shots to go around, but is he going to get as many as he did? There's another area, though, that Zion Williamson really is going to help CJ McCollum. Let's get into what that number is coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Not number, what area that is. Coming up next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Before we get to that, though, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports. You can get in on esports too, even golf. So BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. They got live in-game betting to make all that stuff way more fun in the moment. You can get scores. They got podcasts there too. So head to BetOnline.net today. You can use your mobile device to get there as well and learn more about the action happening today over at BetOnline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast Monday through Friday, coming to you like no one else is, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. What is the most important thing? We're going to be covering all of that during the regular season. Topics of the day, things you need to know. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell a friend about the show. Leave a 5-star review with a comment. And of course, comment down below on YouTube if you want to help support the show. Keep it free in 5 days a week for y'all, because we're going to be here every day unless I'm sick and other things that come up. But we're going to basically be here Monday through Friday because it is the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we are today talking about if the big 3 can each score over 20 points per game. The short answer is yes, right? Like, here's the question for YouTube. Do you think all 3 of them can average over 20 points per game? Or do you think maybe CJ most likely is going to be in line for a bit of a drop just because Zion's coming back? You know, you put the ball in his hands and, you know, he's going to want it, you know, and does it mean that other guys can have as many shot attempts, things like that? I think the answer is still yes. So, look, we don't need to get in too deep on how Zion is going to score over 20 points per game, right? As I said in the beginning, this was more will CJ. But here's something that Zion is really going to help this team with, and I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind. In the 2020-2021 season, when Zion was healthy, right, and played 61 games where he averaged 27 points per game, he got to the free throw line 8.7 times per game. The Pelicans were number 2 in free throw attempts per game, over 26. They were number 2 in free throw rate. It's the number of free throw attempts per field goal attempt, right? So basically how many times are you kind of getting like and ones, more or less, among other things too. They're getting to the line a lot. It was close to 30%, basically. That's an incredible number. It was number 2 in the league. This team is going to be living at the line. They're going to be living in the bonus. CJ McCollum, as I just said, over 11 drives per game getting downhill. While on the Pelicans, he averaged, what was the numbers right here? 3.9 free throw attempts per game. That was highest of his career. You think that's not going to go up next year? You think he's not going to get to the line more than 4 times per game if he wants to? He easily could. That's going to help him get over 20 points per game. That's going to help everyone, really. When you have Zion playing downhill like that, it is going to do so much. And with the rule changes, right? No more take fouls, things like that. You know, you're going to be able to really use all of these strengths of this team to try and get either out in transition and run or get to the line. They're going to be taking some of the more easy, efficient shots in the league. So if Zion gets this team in the bonus, and then CJ goes, okay, well, now I'm going to put pressure on the defense, because worst thing that could happen is you foul me and I go to the line, and he jumps back up to being an 81% shooter from the free throw line. Only good things are going to happen. So when you factor all of that in, I do think that he is going to really be out there and able to, get that pretty close to 20 points per game. I went on the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast show, and Josh Lloyd, who does projections for every player, like this dude is the GOAT when it comes to fantasy basketball. If you play, you've got to listen to Josh Lloyd. You just absolutely need to. He's going to help you win your league. He thinks CJ McCollum's going to be right at 19 points per game. You factor in a little bit of variance there. Their projections, right? Yeah. CJ can very, very, very easily become a 20-point per game scorer, and this team could have 3 guys that are doing that. He also thinks, by the way, that Zion, if he wanted to, could easily get above 30 points per game, and I don't disagree with that. Also factor in that this team was very good in terms of offensive rebounding last year with Jackson Hayes out there and Valanciunas out there. They're going to be able to do that again because one of the better offensive rebounders happens to be Zion Williamson. They were also pretty good at getting to the free throw line last year too without Zion Williamson, so that they were 6th best. All those numbers only going to go up. It's going to just help all of these guys kind of eat and score, and I am very excited to see what they're going to be capable of doing. Like this offense really seems like it's going to be exceptionally elite next year, particularly because I do think the 3-point shooting will get better. But what about Brandon Ingram? We talked about CJ. That was really, the meat of everything here. We just kind of looked at how Zion's going to help. What about Brandon Ingram? Because there is an area where I think he can grow and is also going to open things up more for other players as well. Let's get into that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, Monday through Friday. Tell a friend about the show. And of course, for your second listen, go check out Locked On Saints, Ross Jackson. Dude's awesome. I've been hanging out with him. He's now local. He's going to be at the game tomorrow, covering it, giving you everything you want, or today, depending on when you're listening to the show, the Friday preseason game in the Superdome. He's going to be there. Go give Locked On Saints a listen. He's there Monday through Friday. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're here doing it. Ross is one of the best. Dude's an absolute rising star. Excellent show. Please give Locked On Saints a listen. Make it your second listen today after Locked On Pelicans being your first listen. All right, let's talk about Brandon Ingram here, right? Never gets old talking about this dude because he's just so absolutely awesome. If you look at his season last year, it was really good. The only area that there were two things you'd like a little bit more from him, right? One of them is, he was just injured and dinged up and just not himself for a chunk of the season. 55 games only. And in those 55 games, again, was just his usual self, except for the three-point shooting. That was down last year, 32.7% from three. And this is a guy who the year before was shooting 38%. The year before that, 39%. Very down compared to his two previous seasons in New Orleans. Now, in the playoffs, that jumped up. He shot over 40% on 4.5 attempts per game in the 6 games against the Phoenix Suns, 40.7% from three. Okay, those numbers are good, but you want to see it over the regular season. That number is going to tick back up closer to 38%. I don't really doubt that whatsoever. And in fact, he'll have more breathing room. He's getting double teamed a lot, especially for the first 3 quarters of the year when the roster didn't have CJ. They weren't nearly as good. That was definitely a problem for him. You could feel the spacing issues be a little bit of an issue for him. That's going to be alleviated with Zion Williamson out there. But then it's just also going to let him facilitate really well. When he starts to dribble, drive, and go towards the hoop, teams are going to come out and cover him, right? You have to pick him up early, and you can't just try and take away the rim because he's money from mid-range. So when you do that, it's going to show off his passing ability more. This is a guy who averaged 5.6 assists per game, highest of his career. That number went up in the postseason to 6.2. He can definitely do that. That's also going to create some wide open buckets for CJ McCollum, one of the better outlet shooters here in the league, right? With all 3 of them out there at times, CJ is going to be open a lot because you're going to take away Zion and Brandon Ingram first, if you can, I would imagine. Which means CJ, as a overqualified third best guy on the team, should be able to really, really thrive in that role. I'm not really worried about him being upset about kind of being demoted down a level to, the third best guy out of second, the third option instead of the second option or the first at times. He's just that good and it seems to really be bought into everything this team is doing. I love a dude like that, right? And you're also going to see lineups with just CJ and Zion Williamson out there. And that's going to open things up too. So with the way they can stagger all 3 of these guys, one's always going to be out there on the court, you have to imagine. They could easily do it where, at least 2 of them are out there on the court at any given time. One, when people ask me who's the 6th man, I don't know, it's kind of like it could be CJ McCollum in a sense, right? You get what I'm saying? When you're staggering guys like that, rotating through them like that, it's not like you're going to have a 6th man off the bench and be like, that's the dude right now. Well, it could be CJ. It could be BI, it could be Zion at times because they have the luxury of being able to do that with all 3 of these players. Again, this offense, thinking about it in theory in a vacuum, right, without games being played on paper here, should be so good. So good. I'm really excited for it. I hope you are too, and that's why I hope you make Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day because we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Might do another one this weekend. We'll see how I'm feeling. I did not cough at all. That's a win, I think, on today's show, so I'll take it. So I appreciate everyone for being patient with me as I've gone through having COVID and not being great. These are not my best shows. I know it. I got to shake off a little bit of the cobwebs. We'll be back and better next week as well. So thank you all for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all maybe on Monday or maybe this weekend.